I'm Daniel Brundon. I am a naturalist, and in my day job I'm an ecological consultant working on things like development impacts, species at risk, invasive plants, and natural habitat assessments, mostly in the Ottawa Valley. In the case of Frogsbit, in the Ottawa Valley, we are seeing the worst case scenario. In every suitable pond, so that means not really acidic, which is the typical beaver ponds and such all across Eastern Ontario, Western Quebec, it's there. It's there in abundance, and it's using up a huge amount of the nutrient. It's using up a huge amount of the resource that should be available to the native organisms, and it dies. It creates biomass. It's like a giant pile of compost. You know, it's as bad as having a lot of dogs poop in a pond. You gotta deal with all this stuff. The system tries to deal with it. So with all that extra nutrient, uses up the oxygen. Creates a lot of extra nutrient. It generates huge growth in algae, and that uses more oxygen, and it starts this cycle till you end up with a pretty dead pond. So the diversity of animal and plant life in the pond declines. The pond feeds a stream. The stream's diversity and support systems for larger wetlands declines. It goes on and on and on and on. Times 10,000 beaver ponds, and the Ottawa River's unhappy. One fine day in the 1930s, somebody got it in their heads to put a pretty aquatic plant in a little ornamental pool at the Central Experimental Farm, because that's what this ornamental pool was set up for, which is a lovely idea, except that it wasn't very far away from the Rideau Canal, and some turtle grabbed a bit of it by accident, or it got stuck on a muskrat, or somebody's boots, or I don't know, a little bit of this thing got into the Rideau Canal. And it liked it, and it became abundant in the Rideau Canal. Then it got into the Rideau River, and then it got into the Ottawa River, and now it's throughout the Great Lakes of central North America and spreading beyond that. And it's done that in a mere 80 years, which is nothing biologically. It really isn't. It means fewer opportunities for native species to thrive. It means fewer resources for native species, not only at the site where the frogbit is, but downstream of that. And it's only one example. We have hundreds of non-native elements in our landscape. Here in the Britannia Conservation Area, there are over 600 plant species, for instance. 400 and something of those are native, which is extraordinary diversity for an urban area. But it still means that a third of the total flora is non-native. And all of those things do well at the expense of native things. I don't think anything can be done. I think at some point, you just accept that things are too well established, and whatever we coulda, shoulda, woulda done, it's too late. It's over. And Frogsbit is going to be part of the landscape, the aquatic landscape of the Great Lakes region forever. What I'm basically looking for are miniature water lilies. That's what they really look like. And in the spring, when the water is high, it's really thick. It just absolutely forms a continuous carpet across the surface. It's unusual in the fact that it doesn't have to develop from a seed. A piece of that little leaf I had could generate a new plant. You put that in a pot of water, leave it to its own devices, come back in 2 months, you got a plant. You know, there's roots that are just trailing in the water, just trailing loose in the water, absorbing the nutrients and the water and all the other things that it needs. And they form quite an impenetrable mass. Now there's a lot of things to take advantage of it. There are a lot of insects, certain species of fish, for instance, benefit. It's never cut or dried. Well, I won't say never. Almost never is it cut or dried that something comes in and it's universally a disaster. Typically, there's some benefactors and there's some losers. Typically, the system loses and a few species benefit. The most significant issue about invasive species is the fact that it's the second greatest threat to global biodiversity. I mean, that's pretty significant. The biggest threat is us physically destroying landscape, physically destroying habitat. The second biggest is non-native species being where they're not supposed to be. There's no problem in the individual organism just going out and being, you know, a frogsbit or a water chestnut or a mallard duck. I mean, they are doing what they are doing. But there's a reason, there's a system that developed over eons and eons to accommodate certain packages of resources. We call them landscapes. And if we mess with that in such a short period of time, we're looking at massive losses, massive extinctions, massive costs to us, huge public health issues, all those sorts of things. So it's a stupid move on our part, and we've done it in a matter of only a couple of centuries. Things that have taken tens of millions of years to develop, we've lost them in a couple of centuries. And we're threatening tens of thousands of others in the coming decades, let alone centuries. So it's a very bad, serious, if unsexy issue that we really need to pay more attention to, or have people pay more attention to on our behalf, because there's billions of dollars at stake.